The FIA's aerodynamic testing restrictions were designed to be the ultimate equalizer in Formula One, but Toyota just weaponized a massive wind tunnel loophole to turn Haas into a shadow factory operation, and the governing body is completely paralyzed to stop it. For years, the paddock operated under the assumption that aerodynamic development was strictly caged by the cost cap and the sliding scale of the ATR. You get a set number of hours, a set number of computational fluid dynamics (CFD) runs, and if you exceed them, you face catastrophic grid penalties and financial ruin. But that entirely depends on the FIA having the legal jurisdiction to audit the facility where the testing takes place. By executing a stealth integration with Haas, Toyota Gazoo Racing has established a phantom testing pipeline utilizing their elite Cologne wind tunnel. They have functionally bypassed the tightest aerodynamic regulations in the history of the sport. The structural dependency Haas once had on Ferrari is being completely overwritten by a Japanese corporate titan operating entirely outside the legal boundaries of Formula One's financial regulations. To comprehend the sheer scale of the tactical advantage Toyota has handed to Haas, you first have to understand the suffocating nature of the modern FIA aerodynamic testing restrictions. The ATR is not simply a rulebook, it is a mathematical prison designed to brutally punish success and artificially elevate the backmarkers. Formula One divides the calendar into specific aerodynamic testing periods, ATPs. Within these periods, teams are allocated a highly restricted number of wind tunnel, WT, runs, wind tunnel hours on occupancy, and teraflops of CFD computing power. The scale is sliding. The reigning constructors champion receives the absolute minimum, currently 70% of the baseline allowance. The team finishing dead last receives 115%. Every time a team mounts a 60% scale model onto the strut in their wind tunnel and turns on the fan to simulate airspeeds of 50 meters per second, a highly monitored clock starts ticking. The FIA installs physical sensors and digital auditing software on these facilities. They track the electrical consumption, they track the data packets generated, and they require meticulous declarations of every aerodynamic geometry tested. You cannot sneak an extra hour of testing. If a team attempts to run a wind tunnel off the books, the digital trail will trigger an immediate, devastating audit. Red Bull Racing learned exactly how severe the penalties for financial and testing breaches could be, suffering massive reductions in development time for a minor overspend. The system is supposedly bulletproof. It relies on the absolute authority of the FIA over the 10 registered F1 constructors. But it has a fatal flaw. The FIA's jurisdiction is geographically and corporately limited. The governing body can only police what belongs to a Formula One entrant. This is where the genius of the Toyota operation is exposed. Toyota Motor Corporation is not an entrant in the FIA Formula One World Championship. They are an independent commercial entity, heavily invested in the World Endurance Championship, WEC, the World Rally Championship, WRC, and Global Road Car Research and Development. Situated in Cologne, Germany, is one of the most technologically devastating aerospace facilities on the European continent, the Toyota Gazoo Racing Europe TGR wind tunnel. Originally built for Toyota's previous Formula One operation in the 2000s, this facility is legendary within the motorsport engineering community. It features two independent working sections, capable of testing 60% scale models with a continuous rolling road that perfectly replicates yaw angles, ride heights, and ground effect floor ceiling at speeds well in excess of F1 parameters. For years, this tunnel was actually rented out to McLaren during their most successful modern eras before Woking built their own updated facility. It is a championship-caliber F1-validated aerodynamic laboratory, and most importantly, because it is owned and operated by Toyota for commercial and WEC applications, it exists entirely outside the audit jurisdiction of Formula One's financial regulators. When the FIA audits Haas, they look at the Haas factory in Banbury. They look at the wind tunnel time Haas officially declares. They cannot, under any legal corporate framework, send digital auditors into Toyota's Cologne servers to inspect the aero maps being run for a supposed Le Mans hypercar or a high-performance road vehicle. The boundary of F1 law stops at the perimeter fence of Toyota's property. By forming a technical alliance with Haas, Toyota has opened a gateway into this jurisdictional void. The partnership is strictly marketed as a technical exchange, focusing on people, product, and pipeline. That carefully sanitized corporate phrasing hides the most aggressive aerodynamic laundering operation modern F1 has ever seen. Under current regulations, Haas is legally mandated to use only their allocated ATR hours for the development of their specific VF series chassis. But aerodynamic concepts in the ground effect era are universal physics problems. Understanding how to seal the edge of an underfloor Venturi tunnel, mastering the vortex generation off the front wing end plates to push tire wake outward, or stabilizing a diffuser in low-speed, high-yaw corners. These are mathematical equations that apply to any high downforce prototype racing car. Toyota can run thousands of hours of wind tunnel testing in Cologne, burning through millions of dollars of electricity quality and rapid prototyping materials, legally justifying it as R&D for their Gazoo Racing hypercar program. In the process of running these unlimited tests, Toyota's aerodynamicists are actively solving the exact same airflow separation and floor stalling issues that plague the current generation of Formula One cars. They are generating terabytes of validated aerodynamic data, discovering which floor geometries are sensitive to ride height changes and which underbody strakes best manage dirty air. The data is generated legally, entirely off the books of the FIA cost cap, and completely untouched by the ATR sliding scale. The only missing link is getting that pre-solved aerodynamic knowledge out of the Cologne servers and into the Haas design office without triggering an FIA data transfer alarm. Digital data transfers leave a trail. If Toyota simply emailed Haas the CAD files for a newly optimized front wing geometry, the FIA would instantly disqualify the team. The regulations explicitly forbid the transferring of intellectual property, IP, regarding listed aerodynamic parts between a non-entrant and an entrant outside of strict commercial allowances. Toyota bypasses this digital tripwire by utilizing the ultimate unauditable storage device, the human brain. The core of the Toyota-Haas partnership involves embedding Japanese engineers, aerodynamicists, and trackside personnel directly into the Haas garage during race weekends. On the surface, this is framed as a human resource development program, a way for Toyota to train their young engineers in the high-pressure environment of Grand Prix racing. In reality, it is a devastatingly efficient two-way data bridge. These embedded engineers stand in the Haas garage, analyzing live telemetry. They watch how the Haas car responds to extreme aerodynamic loads through high-speed corners like Copse at Silverstone or the S's at Suzuka. They study the tire degradation profiles, the suspension articulation, and the real-world aerodynamic stalling points of the chassis. Because they are technically Toyota employees on a partnership exchange, they absorb this highly specific F1 telemetry and carry that conceptual knowledge back to the Cologne wind tunnel. Once back in Germany, they can construct testing parameters in their unlimited facility that perfectly mimic the aerodynamic problems Haas is facing on track. They run the tunnel continuously without a ticking ATR clock, experimenting with rapid prototyped aerodynamic geometries until the airflow stalling is cured. When those same engineers rotate back into the Haas design office, they don't bring banned digital blueprints, they bring pre-validated aerodynamic concepts. They bring the exact mathematical understanding of what geometries work and what fail. They steer the official Haas F1 designers away from dead-end concepts, ensuring that when Haas finally uses their strictly limited, FIA-audited wind tunnel time, they are only validating designs that Toyota already knows will work. They are operating with a 100% strike rate. Haas never wastes a single ATR hour on a failed concept, because Toyota has already done the heavy lifting in the Ghost facility. To understand why this specific loophole is a nuclear weapon in the current regulatory cycle, you have to look at the physics of the current F1 cars. Since 2022, Formula One has utilized ground effect aerodynamics. The vast majority of the car's downforce is generated not by the front or rear wings, but by massive Venturi tunnels sculpted into the floor of the car. These floors are incredibly sensitive. If the ride height of the car drops by just 2 millimeters, the airflow inside the tunnel can choke, completely stalling the floor and resulting in a violent loss of downforce, a phenomenon known as porpoising. For 3 years, teams like Mercedes, Ferrari, and Aston Martin have spent tens of millions of dollars and thousands of wind tunnel hours trying to perfectly map the aerodynamic elasticity of their floors. Haas historically could not compete in this development war. Ground effect aerodynamics require constant, iterative testing. You need to test a floor design at varying ride heights, roll angles, and pitch sensitivities. Haas simply did not have the ATR allowance, nor the CapEx budget to run the sheer volume of physical testing required to master these complex flow structures. They were forced to rely on conservative aerodynamic maps, which left them fundamentally slower than the factory teams. The Toyota partnership immediately cures this structural deficit. Toyota's WEC hypercars are heavily reliant on underbody aerodynamics and complex floor sealing. The engineers in Cologne have spent the last 5 years mastering the exact thermodynamic and aerodynamic behaviors of ground effect tunnels across grueling 24-hour endurance races. By filtering this institutional knowledge through the embedded personnel, Haas is instantly leapfrogging the correlation crisis. When Haas designs a new floor upgrade, they are no longer guessing how it will behave when the car bottoms out on a curb. The conceptual architecture of that floor has been heavily influenced by a commercial partner that has run unlimited iterations of the same aerodynamic philosophy in an unregulated tunnel. This aerodynamic laundering operation completely rewrites the financial hierarchy of the grid. The FIA cost cap was supposed to ensure that a midfield team like Haas could never outdevelop a giant like Mercedes or Ferrari simply by throwing money at a problem. But Toyota isn't throwing money at Haas. They are throwing infrastructure at them. Infrastructure is the most heavily heavily guarded resource in Formula One. If Aston Martin wants a new wind tunnel, they have to declare it, navigate brutal capex restrictions, and sacrifice immediate car development to fund the construction. Haas has entirely bypassed this capex prison. They have acquired the operational output of a championship-tier aerospace facility without having to declare a single dollar of construction or maintenance costs to the FIA. Ferrari, Haas's traditional technical partner, is suddenly realizing the danger of this arrangement. For years, Ferrari dominated the relationship by selling Haas non-listed parts, suspensions, gearboxes, and hydraulics. But Haas is rapidly outgrowing this dependency. With Toyota validating their aerodynamic concepts, Haas is gathering the internal capability to design and mandate their own bespoke mechanical solutions. If Haas realizes that the stock Ferrari rear suspension is disrupting the airflow off the back of their newly optimized floor, they now have the R&D backing to mathematically prove it, design a custom alternative, and break away from Maranello's structural grip. Ferrari inadvertently kept Haas alive just long enough for Toyota to step in and turn the American outfit into a heavily armed, autonomous Shadow Works team. The realization of what Toyota is actually doing has sparked a silent panic across the pit lane. Team principals like Toto Wolff at Mercedes and Christian Horner at Red Bull have built massive political empires by strictly managing their own aerodynamic testing limits and carefully monitoring their rivals. They employ dedicated teams of regulatory analysts whose sole job is to scour the FIA documentation looking for breaches by other constructors. But how do you report a breach that technically isn't happening? If Red Bull suspects that Aston Martin is overusing their wind tunnel, they demand an FIA audit of the Silverstone facility. But if McLaren or Mercedes suspect that Toyota is laundering aerodynamic data for Haas, who do they complain to? The FIA has no authority to send inspectors to Cologne to look at Toyota's commercial servers. The FIA cannot subpoena the private emails of a non-entrant corporation. The rival teams are trapped in a regulatory nightmare. They are watching a team with one of the smallest official budgets on the grid suddenly execute rapid, highly effective aerodynamic upgrade packages that suggest a level of correlation and testing volume that should be impossible. Haas is arriving at European circuits with floor modifications and front-wing vortex generators that perfectly suit the track characteristics, a hallmark of a team that has run thousands of hours of off-site simulation. The political civil war is already brewing. Factory teams will undoubtedly begin lobbying the FIA to introduce draconian new clauses regarding personnel contamination. They will demand that any engineer working for an external commercial entity with aerospace facilities must undergo a mandatory gardening leave or data quarantine before they are allowed to step foot in an F1 garage. But enforcing such a rule would destroy the very fabric of F1's sponsorship model. Formula One relies on massive corporate partners, from software giants to automotive manufacturers, embedding their staff with teams. If the FIA bans Toyota from placing engineers in the Haas garage, they set a precedent that could force companies like Oracle, Petronas, or Honda to pull their technical staff from the grid entirely. Toyota has found the ultimate exploit in the system, and they have executed it with devastating precision. They have proven that the FIA cost cap and the ATR sliding scale are only effective if you contain your operations entirely within the recognized boundaries of a Formula One team. The moment you utilize a decentralized corporate structure and lean on an unregulated parent entity, the rules disintegrate. The rest of the grid is now facing an existential threat. The traditional midfield teams, Williams, Alpine, and Sauber, are fighting a losing battle. They are trying to optimize their aero packages using strict, heavily audited wind tunnel allowances, praying that their CFD correlations match the real-world track surface. Meanwhile, Haas is armed with a ghost tunnel. They are insulated from the ATR restrictions by a pipeline of embedded engineers quietly transferring pre-solved aerodynamic physics from the unrestricted ecosystem of Toyota Gazoo Racing directly into the American design office. The FIA cannot write a rule to stop it. The rival teams cannot lobby to ban it without destroying their own sponsorships. And Ferrari can do nothing but watch their subservient customer evolve into a lethal, independent threat. The era of the strictly controlled, artificially balanced aerodynamic playing field is dead. Toyota just fired the first shot of the new regulatory war, and they used Haas's wind tunnel loophole to do it.